This is something you guys have been requesting the hell out of for a long time. It took a lot of time, but I finally found 3 stories that take place during school lockdowns. It was a typical boring day in calculus, only it was Friday 7th period, meaning the week was almost over and spring break would finally be upon us, so everybody was getting antsy in their seats. I could tell we didn't have a test that day like a lot of my friends did with their other teachers. So our teacher in the middle of class just decided to start playing games with us on Sporkle. He was a very laid back teacher. Like that, as we were doing some brand logo quiz on Sporkle, I remember the exact moment it happened right after my friend answered a question. I remember the exact answer to Adidas. The dean's voice came through the loudspeaker. He sounded panicked and frantic as he told all the teachers this was not a drill and to go into lockdown. I actually got the chills and I got goosebumps on my arms as are usually laid back teacher too seemed panicked as he ran to turn off the lights and ushered us to the back corner of the room. We all sat in silence for about 2 minutes, and then the usual buzzing that came from a panel in the back of the room ceased, indicating that the school must have cut all the power. We all looked at each other, realizing this must be serious. A few more minutes of waiting later, we heard a man screaming at the top of his lungs coming down the hallway. 2 girls in the class actually started crying, which made all of us even more scared as the screaming got closer to the classroom. The lunatic-sounding man started banging on the lockers while screaming, "I'll kill all of you." It was at that moment that I started to fear for my life. My teacher shushed us as we all looked at each other to see our peers' reactions. The banging then moved from the lockers to our classroom door, and that's when one of the crying girls screamed no. The banging on the door only grew worse as the man started screaming, "Open up!" 2 of the girls in the class were crying out loud. Now it felt like an eternity that man was pounding at the door, but eventually he finally continued down the hallway screaming like a mentally insane person until we could not hear him anymore. I'd say 10 minutes later, though it felt like half an hour given the situation. The dean came back on the loudspeaker explaining the situation, which was surprising for him to do. He explained that some apparently mentally unstable person entered the building and assaulted the woman sitting at the front desk, causing her to flee the building screaming, and staff wasn't sure if the man was armed or not. Now this was before the school had cameras or could afford proper security, so the school was wide open to something like this happening. The staff had done a sweep of all the hallways and classrooms and couldn't find him, so the dean instructed the teachers to resume teaching, but to keep all the doors locked and to not let any students leave for any reasons. The most disturbing part, however, is that one of the janitors working the night shift found the man sleeping in one of the storage closets near the back end of the school, and according to rumors that were spread by my peers, sticking out of his pocket was a .44 Magnum. The janitor must have done something stupid to wake him up, for example leaving the closet door open, because by the time a police officer could arrive on the scene, the man was gone. My entire class, as far as I know to this day, has no idea if this man was ever found, but I like to think that right now he's being given the proper help that he needs. Music. My school has 2 lunch periods. First lunch period is for all 6th graders and some 7th graders. The second lunch period is for the other half of the 7th graders and all 8th graders. The lockdown happened in beginning of October. The day the lockdown occurred, it was overcast and rainy during the first lunch period. I heard 4 loud booms. I personally thought it was thunder, but the entire lunch crowd started screaming. I was thinking those kids were just serious, but the campus security came in and started yelling at people to go into the multi-purpose room, and the kids who were in line buying lunch had to throw out their lunch and come inside me, and some friends went inside the room along with a huge group of other kids. Everyone was curious as to what was happening. Our multi-purpose room is huge, and the back wall of the room is made of see-through glass. When me and my friends were rushed inside the campus, security was covering the glass with the curtains, and there were adults at every exit. My friend Eric was curious as well as the rest of us, so he asked one of the adults what was going on. When he came back, he said, "You know how right in front of TMS there's those houses?" I replied, "Yeah. There's this mentally disabled crazy man that barricaded himself in front of his house, and he's threatening to commit suicide and kill the cops if he's evicted. He was walking around outside of school watching kids in weird way. Eric told us it turned out the man was also a registered sex offender. Making matters worse, we were stuck in the multi-purpose room for a whole hour, taking up 2 periods. After the whole thing was settled, we were escorted to our classrooms one by one. I later found out that the man lives next to my friend Brandy, who told me about the previous Halloween when she saw the same man at his window cutting his arm and writing in his own blood, "Don't come here or I'll kill you," on his window. Of course, being Halloween, people including Brandy assumed it was just for the holiday, but after this horrific incident we knew this man was mental, and we're glad he never got near music us. I'm 22 years old, fresh out of college, and I recently got a job at my old high school as a sort of computer intern in the school basement. The basement of the school is very messy and disorganized, but there is a small 3r's office that's actually very nice down there. It has 3 nice big desks, 2 mini fridges, a flat screen TV mounted on the wall, and oh so satisfying air conditioning, a luxury the students and teachers cannot enjoy in the school. And of course all school servers and other computery stuff. I got the job because 3 of my old computer teachers flat out adored me. I could actually consider them as real friends, not just teacher figures. So they all helped tremendously in landing me this job. It's been great until something that happened a few weeks ago. My 2 co-workers that shared the office with me, Dave and Gary, weren't in the office at the time. They were upstairs working on papers or whatever. I was eating my sandwich during my lunch break when I got a phone call from one of the women in the front office telling me the school was on lockdown and that somebody possibly armed had entered the school. There wasn't much that I could do other than turn off the lights, because surprisingly, as nice as this little office was, it didn't have an actual door to it, just a big opening, and the door to the whole basement didn't even have a working lock. For my own safety, I did turn off all the lights in the office and my computer screen. I kept my phone on the desk, texting both Gary and Dave, but they wouldn't respond. I sat down there in the dark playing games on my phone for like 20 minutes, waiting for the call from up front to tell me to resume working. I had no idea what was happening. I couldn't hear what was going on upstairs from down here, but I was not allowed to make any calls until I was informed that the lockdown was over. Then the noisy basement door opened as the creaking echoed across the basement and into my office. I sat up from my seat, wondering if I should call out Gary or Dave. I was eager to get some info from them. Someone then came running down the stairs, and their footsteps were approaching my office. I pushed away my chair and crawled under my desk. Somebody entered the office, but did not turn on lights. There was just silence. I can't even describe the fear I was experiencing. I felt like if I made one sudden noise, I'd be a dead man. Suddenly, my phone dinged as I got a text message. I felt my entire world shrivel up and die at that one moment as I clenched my teeth in fear. Footsteps suddenly moved closer to me until I finally dove out from under the desk in capitulation, begging whoever it was not to kill me. And just then someone grabbed my arm and pulled me up. It was some guy in a red plaid button-up jeans and a reddish-black cap. He told me, "It's okay, I'm just down here hiding with you." "What's going on up there?" I whispered to him. He kind of ignored my question and asked me if there's an exit down here. I told him yeah, around that way. Before he could do anything else, I asked him, "Who are you?" There was a brief moment of silence before he started explaining. He was coming in to pick up his son when a teacher told him to hide. After his explanation, I checked my phone and saw the text I received was from Dave. It said, "Dude, this is crazy. Some guy with a gun shot Mr. Buckley. He's wearing a red shirt and hat. Whatever you do, don't come upstairs." I was about to reread that text out loud to the man until I realized. I looked up and felt my stomach sink. The man seemed to catch on to my suspicious stare. Panicking, all I could think to do was to run for the upstairs. A gunshot echoed through the basement, and I could hear the bullet ricochet off something metal in the darkness. But thank God the bullet missed me, and I made it upstairs. Fortunately, police were waiting at all exits, including the basement exit, and caught the man the second he opened the door. More good news. Our teacher, Mr. Buckley, survived the gunshot. It was later determined that the man and Mr. Buckley had some beef for whatever reason, but that was never ever revealed. All we know is that Mr. Buckley couldn't have done anything that would have warranted this kind of reaction, and I know that the sound of that gunshot will forever echo in my mind. I grew up in a small town in West Virginia. I won't share the name of the college I attended, but it was a small university in a little town about 15 minutes from where I grew up. I was a freshman in 2021, and CO was still an important factor in my college experience. One of the biggest impacts was on the dorms. Most students didn't stay on campus due to CO, so they rented apartments nearby. I was poor and didn't have that luxury, so I stayed on campus and drove home for the weekend since I lived so close. Still, I wanted the full college experience in the dorms. On my first day, I met my roommate. We had chatted a little over text because the school had given her my phone number so we could get to know each other, which I thought was a little strange. She messaged me first and seemed nice. Meeting her in person, she was still nice, but didn't say much. She carried a privileged attitude. One time while talking, she said everyone has their own rooms due to a lack of students. I did last semester and now until you joined. I was a little taken aback and didn't know what to say, so I just changed the topic and continued the conversation. I told her I lived nearby and that I'd leave for the weekend on Friday and be back on Monday morning at 6:00. She didn't say much during the weekdays. She mostly stayed with her boyfriend in his dorm room. Now for the creepy part. The first Friday, I packed my bag for the weekend and left. I came back Monday morning at 6:00, just like I said I would. I didn't have class until 10:00, so I went back to sleep. I had a thick memory foam mattress, and after lying down for about 10 minutes, I felt the edge of the bed indent. I didn't move. I waited a minute, barely processing what was happening because I was so tired. Then the mattress went back up. That's when it hit me. Someone had leaned on my bed. I turned around and saw her facing the wall, presumably sleeping. So I went back to sleep. The next weekend, I left again and returned at the same time. Again, I wanted more sleep. Moments after lying down, I felt the mattress indent again. But this time it wasn't just the edge. The whole side sagged and someone was sitting next to me. I didn't move. I lay there frozen, and then I heard them get up. My bed was very high. In fact, I needed a step stool to climb onto it, and I heard them jump off. I held my breath, then looked over. She was again lying on her bed facing the wall. I didn't know what to think. Was I hallucinating from the lack of sleep? Was it sleep paralysis? It couldn't be. I could still move. Could someone have gotten into my room? Impossible. We were the only ones with keys. I decided I must be extremely tired and just imagining things, so I went back to sleep. When Monday came around, I was really nervous. I walked in and saw her lying down facing my bed. She was asleep, so I climbed into bed and tried to sleep as well. 5 minutes later, I felt my bed indent again. I squeezed my eyes shut, felt someone sit next to me, and braced myself to turn around. Then I felt a hand on the back of my neck. My heart sank. I thought I was going to pass out. I didn't move a muscle. They didn't squeeze. They just held my neck. What felt like hours later, I felt them finally get off my bed. I still didn't move. I stayed frozen for a few more moments, terrified, then turned around. She was facing the wall, sleeping, but I didn't care. I left the room immediately and called my mom. I didn't go to class. I told my mom everything, and she reported it to the school. I was allowed to switch rooms, thank God. They asked if I wanted to involve the police, but I said no. There wasn't actual proof she had done anything. I just asked them not to give her another roommate. After unpacking in my new room, I remembered a few things. She had once told me that she had a previous roommate who didn't stay long, but she never said why. I also remembered one day she opened a locked drawer containing about 10 bottles of prescription medicine. She said it was for a skin issue. I wondered if that was true. Maybe she had another disorder or scary side effects from the medication. A few days later, I realized I had left a book and binder in her room. I didn't care much about the book, but she messaged me asking me to come get it. I told her I needed to focus on school in my new room, but agreed to retrieve my things to avoid suspicion. My key still worked, so I went in. She wasn't there, and I sighed in relief. I grabbed my belongings and turned to leave. As I turned, she was standing in the doorway. I hadn't heard her unlock it. I smiled, trying to stay calm. She didn't say anything at first. I walked past her to leave. Then she asked, "Where's your new room?" I told her it was on the first floor. She asked which hall, and I lied. She asked what it was near, the stairs, the front, the office, etc. I said I didn't remember, but she kept pressing. I lied again, saying it was near the stairs. I turned around and left, never seeing her again. I thought about telling her boyfriend, but I was too scared. I still think about it. Was I dreaming, hallucinating? I don't think so, but it couldn't have been anyone else. Only we had keys. Maybe she was sleepwalking as a side effect of her medication. Or maybe she was planning something sinister. My mom thinks she was testing how close she could get to me before I woke up. And that one morning she might have actually tried to choke me. I don't know. It's in the past now. And I hope she never had another roommate again. Music. This incident occurred during my time at university. I attended the University of Huddersfield from 2021 to 2023. It's not exactly known for its nightlife, so a lot of students end up spending late nights on campus, especially in the library or the academic buildings that stay open 24/7. I've never been the type to stay out late myself, but this happened during my last year when I had no choice. I was taking an advanced statistics class, and our professor was notorious for loading us with massive assignments. The due date for one of the biggest projects was approaching, and I hadn't made as much progress as I should have. My laptop had been giving me issues, so I decided to use the computers in the business building. The business building is a little isolated from the rest of the campus. It's 3 stories tall, kind of old, and it always had this weird, sterile silence to it, especially at night. But the computer lab on the 2nd floor was usually pretty empty after 9:00 p.m., so I figured it would be the best place to focus. That night, I got there around 10:00. The campus was already dead quiet, and when I stepped inside, I noticed right away how much colder it felt than outside. I swiped my student ID, heard the beep, and the door unlocked. The whole place had an overwhelming odor of cleaning chemicals, which meant that I wouldn't bump into any of the cleaning staff as they had already done their rounds in this building. I went straight to the computer lab, booted up one of the computers, and started working. For a while, it wasn't bad. The hum of the computer and the tapping of my keyboard filled the silence. I kept glancing at the clock in the corner of the screen, reminding myself that I'd leave before 1:00 a.m., but around 11:30, something weird happened. I was scrolling through some data when I heard the sound of a door slamming shut somewhere down the hallway. Not the front entrance, it came from further inside the building. At first, I brushed it off. Maybe it was just the air system or the janitor. But then I remembered the janitors had already come through, and by now they'd be long gone. I tried to ignore it and kept working, but then came footsteps. Slow, heavy footsteps echoing from the hallway outside the lab. They weren't rushed, and they weren't faint. Whoever it was, they were walking like they wanted to be heard. I froze in my chair, staring at the computer screen, hoping they just passed by. But instead, the steps stopped right outside the lab door. I could see through the little window in the door if I leaned back, but I couldn't bring myself to look. I just sat there holding my breath. After maybe 10 seconds, I heard the door handle being rattled. It wasn't like someone casually testing it. It was someone deliberately trying to scare me. Like whoever, it was wanted to open it, but couldn't. My heart started pounding. The lab doors locked automatically after a certain time, so I knew they shouldn't be able to just walk in, but the way they kept rattling the handle made me feel sick. After maybe 30 seconds of this, the sound stopped. The footsteps started again, slowly moving down the hall until they faded away. I sat there in silence, debating whether I should just pack up and leave. But my project was due the next morning, and a part of me thought that maybe it was just another student messing around. I tried convincing myself of that and went back to typing, but not even 10 minutes later I heard it again, footsteps, only this time they weren't coming from the hallway, they were above me. The ceiling in that building has those thin panels, and you can sometimes hear the pipes when the heat kicks on. But this wasn't pipes. This was the distinct sound of someone crawling or dragging themselves directly above the tiles. I stared up, terrified as to what I would see. I could see one of the tiles shift slightly, just enough to know that weight was pressing down on it. Then came this slow creak, like someone carefully lowering themselves, trying not to be heard. I had enough at this point. I yanked out my flash drive, shoved my notebook into my backpack, and sprinted towards the door. The second I stepped into the hallway, it was like I'd walked into a different world. The hall was dimly lit by those buzzing fluorescent lights, and all I could hear was the sound of my sneakers squeaking against the tiles. I walked fast, trying not to outright run. I got to the stairwell, shoved the door open, and started down. That's when I made the mistake of looking up. On the landing above me, just one floor up, there was a man. He wasn't a student, nor was he a professor. He looked out of place, like his clothes were baggy and torn. His face half-shadowed, but I could see his mouth was hanging open like he was grinning really wide. He didn't move. He just stood there staring down at me. I bolted. I flew down the stairs so fast I almost tripped. I slammed through the first floor door and I sprinted for the front entrance. My ID card barely registered fast enough to unlock it, but once it clicked, I shoved it open and ran across campus without looking back. I didn't stop until I was inside my dorm with my door locked behind me and my back pressed against the door as I tried to catch my breath. The next morning, I went back only because I had to turn in the projects. When I walked into the business building during daylight, it felt like a completely different place, but I noticed something that made my stomach drop. I saw one of the ceiling tiles was missing. The one directly above from where I had been working along with the one from the corner, which is the tile I saw moving. It was as though someone had been watching me work, then proceeded to rattle the door handle to deliberately mess with me. And when they found the door to be locked, they proceeded to climb back up into the ceiling and enter from there. I dread to think what his intention was if he entered the lab before I ran. I think it's safe to say I'm going to buy a new laptop and in the future complete my assignments from the comfort of my own dorm. Music, my name is Annabelle. I'm 20 years old from the UK, and this happened to me in high school, which is what we call college here in the UK. This was when I was 16. I'm about to tell you about the scariest day of my life. Sounds dramatic, I know, but you'll see why. So, for context, my school had these lanyards with ID cards on them. And although anyone can walk into the building, you can only go beyond the foyer if you scan one of these IDs on a screen, which opens the door into the school. The IDs have your face and name on them, but a lot of kids flip them around so you can't see their picture. You also need this to open up pretty much every door in the school other than for classrooms. Also, this was a fairly newly built school. It was really small, but looked bigger because the building was pretty large. A third of the building was a special school for kids with learning disabilities. Another third of it was a nursery, and the last third of it was the actual high school. I had just started at this high school, and I vividly remember everyone being told on the first day to make sure not to let anyone in the school that we didn't know. The day that this incident happened, it was the second week of